All right, let's do this. Good afternoon, everybody. It's been a week since we were all here in this room together, but it feels like longer, right? Months, years, decades. All right, let's do this. We're going to continue today talking about reptile diversity, and we've got a whole bunch of other stuff going on in this class. This is the fun part of the semester, where we have like 7 things going on at once, and we get to bounce around between them all and interact with each other and do a bunch of different stuff. So today's agenda, well, I should say in advance of today's class, you were completing the reflection questions on life in cold blood. So that's in Blackboard, and that was due before the start of class today. And then today in class, here's what we got on the agenda. I'll just go through this. Let me fix this. The first is a really cool herpetology in the news segment I want to share with you. That was really interesting. So we'll start off with that. And then we're going to work in your small groups. So you were in small groups on Zoom on Wednesday, working on those summaries from the Herpetological Review, identifying the primary characteristics of a good summary of an article. And you're going to have a chance to work with your group and finalize that and get it in, so you don't have to worry about it for outside of class. Then I'm going to lecture for a little bit, continuing on our overview of reptile diversity. We'll finish up talking about quote unquote lizards, and then we'll start into crocodilians if we have time. And then I'm going to go over your first primary literature assignment. So you notice in your syllabus you had 3 primary literature assignments, each worth 25 points. Your first one is going to be, I'm going to set you up for that today. And then we're going to talk about our mudpuppy trip for tomorrow. And finally, I have quiz number 1 to give back to you. We'll debrief your scores and go over that. And then I've got to tick it out with some questions for you. So busy day today, lots going on, which is always fun. We'll take a break somewhere in there, just depending on how things go. Before we dive into all of that, questions, comments, concerns, things you want to share, just in general, you know. Nobody wants to share anything. Actually, Will, would you mind shutting that door? I kind of like to leave that closed when we're actually in class. SK, please. Thanks, Will.
Events coming up for Treehouse, just like if this is okay.
Yeah, make an announcement. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, we have Treehouse is an environmental small living unit on campus, and right now it's slushy, which is basically a reaction. So if you want to apply, if you want to come to some events today, there's like a big one also physically on every come and join us and you can learn more about it.
Oh, cool. So I'll just repeat so I get it on the recording here to make sure you can hear. So you can slush. Is it a verb? Did I say you can slush for Treehouse, which apparently is a cool house. I know some people that live there firsthand, and I can vouch for them. And there is an event tonight at 7. Is that right? And you're what? 5 to 7. And where is that? In the Venice room. Okay, so check it out. If you have questions, ask SK. Also, just in general, if you are part of a student club or whatever, have an event coming up and want to tell people in the class, that's great. And if you email me a slide, I can put a slide in the lecture too. I know sometimes if there's like seminars and things like that, we can have announcements. Okay.
I'm an interfaith.
Okay.
I'm the House of Linguistic Diversity.
Dang, there's all these cool slews. I wish I had a slew.
Come join Travis.
Yeah, I might actually. I was thinking about slushing for a treehouse. It'd be cool. I've been in there. It looks pretty fun. All right. Yeah. All right. So herpetology news. So this is an article actually that Princeton sent me, and I read it, and it was one of those moments when I was like, damn. Reptiles and amphibians are cool, as if I didn't believe that beforehand. But I want to talk a little bit about genome. We're actually going to get into a little bit of genome science later in this semester. So just to define the term genome, genome refers to like the entire set of genetic sequence of an organism, like basically all of its DNA. And so oftentimes we talk about things related to, say, genetics. And we can learn certain things from aspects of the genetics that have to do with certain genes or different aspects, smaller segments of the genome. But the genome, when we talk about genomics or studying the genome, we kind of mean the whole thing all at once. All of those genes put together that are important for building an organism and also passing on genetic information to the next generation. So what's cool about salamanders, among many, many other things, is they have many species, and this is a generalization, but many species, such as the mudpuppy you see here, have enormous genomes, like super, super giant genomes. And I'll show you a figure that exemplifies that in just a second. And what that means is that because it has all of this DNA, that means that each of its cells need to be bigger because it has all of that DNA. And so in this case, the cells of these organisms are 300 times bigger than those of other vertebrates, with about 38 times more DNA than humans. So we think of your genome as like the building blocks of an organism. We make the assumption sometimes that the more complicated, the bigger, the more nucleotides there are in that code, the longer it is, the more complicated of an organism we can build. But that's not necessarily the case, because often these genomes are filled with sections of DNA that don't actually code for proteins, and in fact can slow down the coding of proteins. And specifically, these some of these sections are called transposons. And these are sections, and one of you have probably studied this in your genetics courses. These are sections of DNA that can essentially insert themselves into different places in the genome. So they're little, like, you can think of them as like little selfish genes that basically can replicate and put themselves around the genome. And basically, salamanders' genomes are just riddled with these transposons, which are often referred to as junk DNA. Although that's a little bit of a misnomer because they play an important role. One of the things that they can do is they slow down everything, because every time a cell replicates, it needs to copy its entire genome, right? But if your genome is 38 times larger than that of a human, that means it's going to take that much more time and energy to replicate that genome with every cell division. Because remember, every cell in the body has this complete set of DNA. And so what that does is it basically forces the cells of the salamander to move a little bit slower, and it plays an important role, for example, for regeneration. So salamanders are kind of famous for being the only vertebrates that can regenerate a limb, for example, if it's removed. They can regenerate tails, and in some cases, they did an experiment where they took out, I think, a third or a quarter of the brains of salamanders, and they actually could regenerate their brains. This is tied into the fact that they have this big genome, because essentially what that means is that a lot of the cells never mature and they stay in this immature state where they can then change and differentiate into different cell types. It also plays an important role in their physiology, keeps them kind of slow. So there's species of salamander, for example, that can live 100 years. Some of them can go years, literally years, without eating or really even moving. They just kind of hang out. Now, there's other things going on there, but part of the story are these giant genomes that they have because of all these transposons that have just gone bonkers in the genome. And so I have an article that's in your class program for next week that you'll read. It's a little bit of a longer read. It's from a recent issue of Scientific American. It probably takes about 15 minutes to read. One of the quotes is about this mudpuppy is this. I love this quote. It spends its entire life confined to water, an overgrown larva that never completes metamorphosis. What's the word for that? Pedomorphic, good. With flaccid legs too small for its body, toes that haven't finished sprouting, a missing upper jawbone, and puffy larval gills bulging from its neck. And so actually the story is about a different species of mudpuppy, but very closely related to Necturus maculosus, the one that we have here in Ohio, right? So basically, it's this organism that never quite seems to get fully developed and get strong and like complete all its stuff. They have these really like weak, flimsy hearts in many cases. But what I think is really cool and instructive about this is it teaches us how evolution works, and that there's this misconception often of what survival of the fittest. We hear that phrase all the time, and what it means to be fit. And we use the word fit in a common parlance to mean like, you know, we think of someone who's fit as someone who's super buff and goes to the gym and can run fast and jump and lift heavy things. But in an evolutionary sense, that word has a completely different meaning. All it means is that you can pass on your genes. And in some cases, being slow and not needing a lot of energy or other traits are actually pretty advantageous. Or if they're not advantageous, they're good enough. Evolution doesn't operate to select for the fastest or the strongest organism. It kind of just selects for the good enough organism that can pass on its genes. And so I think this is really instructive to think about how selection and evolution work. Now, to give you an idea of how big the genome is, this is drawn to scale. So imagine, if you would, that you could take all of the base pairs of a human and it would make a circle about this big, right? Let's just imagine, like, let's have this as our baseline as humans. Some animals have smaller genomes, so the common garter snake is a little bit smaller, the robin's even smaller. There's some simple, there's snails and pufferfish have these really small genomes, fruit flies really small. Now, by comparison, a grasshopper, well, this particular species of grasshopper has this big of a genome. So imagine this circle going all the way out here. Now look at the lungfish, or this, the mudpuppy, the river, the water dog they call it here. Imagine if this circle continued out, like how big that would be in comparison to the human genome, just to give you an idea of how much bigger their genomes are compared to ours. So really pretty interesting, fascinating study about how the structure of the genes of an organism affect its physiology and its life history, but then also turns some of our maybe preconceptions about how evolution works on its head. So that article is in your program for next week. And just to clarify, you have a class program for next Monday. Since the field trip will be Wednesday, you just have one that's due, all the stuff is due from 1 week from now. So it's a little bit bigger. It's not that much bigger, but it's not due Wednesday. It'll be next week, Monday. And I put this article in there. So be sure to check it out. It deals with a lot of concepts that we've either talked about already in class or we will talk about pretty soon. So it's neat. Thanks to Princeton for finding that. How did you come across that one?
Twitter.
Okay, Twitter. Yeah, there you go. Science Twitter. Love it. Questions, comments, thoughts? How many of you have taken genetics? 270. Is that 261 or 71? 271. Do you talk about genomes in genetics? I'm not sure what topics are covered in genetics. Does it get into like genome biology a little bit, or a little? Yeah. Okay. Cool. Well, we'll talk about that more. Actually, we're going to talk about genomics in relation to venom and snake venom coming up soon in class as well, which will be pretty cool. So I'm going to introduce that topic. Great. Well, next step, I would like you, please, to get back with your current research groups from Wednesday. And basically, your goal here is just to finalize the work that you did, make sure everything's good to go, and make sure you share that document with me. As you recall from class Wednesday, there was a spreadsheet you could use as a template. Many of the groups have already shared this with me. I just want to give you time to make sure everything is good to go. So what I'll do, I don't know how long this is going to take. We'll just kind of play it by ear depending on each group. Go ahead, find a person in your group and go somewhere and talk to your group, and I'll go and check in with you and make sure everything is good. Remember, please, a couple things is that on this document, make sure the names of each group member are on the top there. That makes my life easier. And then make sure that you share that Google Doc with me. If you've already shared it with me, then you don't need to share it with me again, as long as I save the link and I have access to it. That sound okay? All right, go ahead and work with your groups. I'll come around and check in on you. All right, let's go ahead and bring it back. I am hearing way too much laughter, which tells me that you're done working and you're just doing fun stuff. And this is class. This should not be fun. Yeah, I'm looking in your direction, Michaela. I heard you laughing. There's nothing funny. There's nothing funny about herpetology. Yeah, actually. All right, it sounds like all of the groups are good to go. So I will grade those and get those back to you soon, probably later this week, or probably by next week's Monday class, since class Wednesday will be a field trip. Before we move on to our next segment in class today, any questions about that? Okay, well, let's, yep, Sam. Yes. I have a slide, and at the end of class today, we're going to go over all the field trip logistics. So let me get to that a little later, okay? Yep, that's a really good question. We'll just set it up at the end of class. All right, let's go back and talk about reptiles. So I'm going to pick up where we left off the other day. Just as a reminder, there's 4 major groups of reptiles. Brynchocephalia, which is composed of a single species of Tuatara, single extant species. There used to be many, many other species in this group. We have Crocodilia, which has a couple dozen species. We have turtles, which has several hundred species. And then we have squamata, which has 10,000 plus species. Again, remember, I don't ask you, you don't need to know these exact numbers, but it is important to know the relative amounts, that there's only 1 species of Tuatara, a couple dozen crocs, a couple hundred turtles, and then 10,000 squamates, which tells us that the vast majority of reptile species fall in this group of squamates. If you look at the evolutionary relationships among them, just as a couple quick reminders, notice at the top we have this clade. That's the extant amphibians. It's a clade because it's monophyletic. Notice importantly that frogs and salamanders are sister taxon, so they're more closely related to each other than either is related to our caecilians. Notice that amphibians are the outgroup then to all of these other terrestrial vertebrates, which include mammals, what we commonly call reptiles, which also includes, of course, our birds. Now, if we look at the evolutionary relationships among our reptiles, we notice that squamates are sister to Brynchocephalia, which is the Tuatara. And so these 2 groups here form a clade. And this clade, actually, this is a vocabulary word that I wanted to put in the lecture and I didn't, so I'm going to write it up here. This is called Lepidosauria. Lepidosauria. That is the name of the group that includes squamates plus Tuatara. Now, those are the extant species within the Lepidosauria, but you'll see some others when we talk about it later. For example, mosasaurs. Giant aquatic reptiles that lived around the time of the dinosaurs are in this group as well, and there's some other really cool stuff. So Lepidosauria right now is just squamates plus Tuatara. When we study prehistoric reptiles, you see that there's some other cool stuff in that group, but they're just extinct now. We're going to talk about turtles next week. I saved the best for last. Today we're going to talk about squamates. Now, a couple reminders. You've seen this figure a couple times already, but just again to set this up. Very complicated phylogeny of squamates. The takeaway message, though, is that lizards, what we commonly call lizards, is paraphyletic with respect to snakes and amphizvanians. Snakes are just a highly derived group of lizards. Snakes are, in fact, a clade. They are all, it's a monophyletic group. But they are nested within lizards, which again means that some lizards are more closely related to snakes than they are to other lizards. For example, geckos. We talked about generally the diversity of squamata. I covered snakes last week. Just as a quick reminder, we've got 5 lizard species and 28 snakes native here to Ohio. So let's go back. I'm going to do a little bit of review of our lizards and then pick up with some new information. There's 26 lizard families in the world. We are going to focus on 6 of them that I would like you to know. That, of course, is Chameleonidae, Iguanidae, Geckonidae, Lacertidae, Skinkidae, and Varanidae. So those are the 6 that we'll focus on. Again, this is all review from Wednesday. Just want to set the stage again. It's been a long time. Make sure that's good. We good? Questions on this so far? Ooh, and I do have, I want to plug this in and see if I get sound to work. So just as a quick reminder, I covered chameleons on Wednesday, so I'm not going to go over this slide in detail, but I do want to point out that there are many of these really cool, unique, derived morphological characteristics in this clade that included these casques and crests and horns, very extensile tongues for prey capture. They can change their colors. They can move their eyes independently. They also have these laterally flattened bodies, et cetera, et cetera. And I want to play, this is a 3-minute video that I think, Ethan, you posted this in the group me, but it really illustrates this photo. You can't really see a lot of that stuff in this image. I guess you can see the crest here in the eye, but I wanted to show you this video to get an idea of some of these characteristics. So let me go ahead and play this. And I might need to futz with the sound here, so just be patient for a second.
They're like looking, but they're also like more evolved than other types of lizards.
Right. So Sid's question is the lineage older than other lizard other lizard lineages? It's like a tongue twister. So let me point out by saying this first of all, is that we go back to the most recent common ancestors of all the lizards, right? And then we take all of these branches. Important to remember that all of these lineages are the same age. So we can't really say one lineage is older than the other. They've all kind of been around for the same amount of time from this most recent common ancestor. Now, what we can say is which groups exhibit characteristics that are most ancestral, that are most like this most recent common ancestor. And so what we want to think about is which of the living species most closely resemble this most recent common ancestor versus which have the most derived characteristics. And the short answer is we don't really know too much about this species, right? We don't know exactly what it was or when it was. We have a pretty fair idea of some of this. But what you want to think about is that the characteristics possessed by this species, the most recent common ancestor, are probably characteristics that most of these animals have, or ones that we find most commonly. It's more complicated than that, but that's kind of a rough way to think about it. So for example, all of these guys have paired copulatory organs. So probably their most recent common ancestor had paired copulatory organs as well. Chameleons have a lot of derived characteristics we don't find in other clades, right? And so with all the things we talked about here, so that suggests anyway that these are derived in this lineage, but not in other lineages. And so that probably these characteristics weren't found in that most recent common ancestor. So I would guess that like extensile tongues, changing colors, eyes moving independently, those are probably not characteristics of the original lizard, and were just derived in this lineage because we don't find them very widely. That's a really good question, Sid. Thanks for asking that. And Lisa, I see your hand up too.
I'm worried about asking this.
Okay.
Okay, so the Gecko, is it because they're herpetologic in respect to birds? Is that why? Because like I was confused as to why chameleons had like these weird kind of like.
Oh, yeah, that's a great question. It is different from the fact that they're closely related to birds. But it could be an example of like convergent evolution, right? Where two different lineages evolve very similar traits because of similar selective pressures, right? And so because they're fairly closely related, they have the same bone structure in their appendages, and so that bone structure can then evolve in these different lineages in a similar way to give them this kind of zygodactylic structure. Yeah. So you can bring those two ideas together, although it's important to know that it's not one because of the other. That's a good question, Lisa. Other questions? Okay, let's watch this short video on chameleons. All right, so very cool kind of annual life cycle of those guys. Michaela, go ahead. Yeah, they do that funny motion. I don't know the adaptive significance of that. I'm not sure exactly what. Is it to kind of, so they're not like the only thing that's moving smoothly in this kind of complex canopy? Yeah.
Exhibit, like if you surprise them, they'll be like kind of swaying back and forth. But if they're on their own, they'll just be like
Abby, go ahead.
Normally, I feel like it's the males who are all colorful. So why in this case the males are green and the female was colorful?
Yeah. So in a lot of cases of sexual selection, we have the males that are colorful or ornamented, and the females can select their male based on that coloration. So your question is why in this case is it the opposite? There are some systems in which it's opposite. I don't know enough about these guys specifically to say. I also don't know if that's coloration is unique to like breeding or if they're like that all the time, because they can change their color too, don't forget. So that's a great question. I don't know the answer. We should look it up. Anyone have a guess on that? Mm-hmm.
Why? And this might just be because why do they move so slowly? They can move that fast. I've never seen a chameleon move that before.
When they charge each other? I mean, the same reason any organism doesn't move fast unless it has to is conserve energy, right? And so, I mean, if there was a predator or something like that, then they would book. But for the most part, just chilling, man. Yeah, and it's costly to move that quickly. So unless they really need to, yeah. Go ahead. Ethan.
It's also because they're like ambush predators as well. So if you're running around
Ah.
tree tops, you're not gonna be able to like dial in on an insect
Mhm.
because they gotta then focus on the insect as well. Like when they then hunt with an insect, their eyes, you know, you have them, but they're independent of each other.
Mhm.
But when they actually find an insect, they'll converge in the same point, and that's how they judge the distance to strike.
Mhm. Which is easier to do if you're stationary
Yeah.
or moving slowly compared to moving quickly.
But I also want to say that's another example, I believe, of a species where if they're kept in captivity, they can live multiple years. But a lot of them, I think I kind of mentioned this the other day, but a lot of them, it's so taxing to do things like give birth. Like when my male chameleon, she's probably the size of like that size. So even something that small, it laid about 70 eggs.
Holy crap.
And each egg was like double the size of a jelly bean. So they basically will like they'll put all their energy into making eggs and then put them all out.
Yep.
Because they have no chance of surviving the
Right.
species with a few eggs.
Right.
But a lot of chameleon species, if you give them all the resources, those live for 5-10 years.
They will, even those annual species?
Yeah.
That's interesting. I did not
So
know
those like veils, they will in the wild because they live in like more desert-like climates.
that.
They'll pass away after a year typically, so they'd be considered an annual species. But if you have especially like a male, those can live 10 years.
So in captivity.
Yeah.
Interesting. McKenna, go ahead.
I was gonna say, one of the reasons that maybe the females are more powerful in that particular species could be because one, their life cycle is very short.
Mhm.
So it's extremely important to make sure, like, individuals can locate each other.
Totally.
So typically it's like males seeking out females.
Mhm.
So the reason that the females might be like so powerful is so that they're easier to find. So it ensures better reproductive success for the individuals.
That seems,
So those-
yeah, that seems pretty reasonable. I don't know for sure, but that seems like as logical as a explanation that I could come up with. Yeah.
A lot of chameleon colors are just based around like signaling to other chameleons their like, you know, I guess for lack of a better term, emotional status, right?
Uh-huh.
So like for instance, if that female is so colorful, like I guess the Galaparous said, it could be trying to signal to the male that yes, I've already mated, or you know, conversely, yes, I'm interested in mating with you. It's just like a lot of like, you know, interest-specific signaling, which is why we chose colors and not blended.
I know with some species too, if I remember right, the black, when you see that black, it can be a sign of like, I'm not dominant here. So the female can be showing that like, I'm not dominant here, but then I also don't dominate at all.
Interesting. Alan, go ahead.
I was kind of going to say what Princeton said.
But the interest,
Coloration thing and how they use it to
communicate. Yep.
I also found that they will change its coloration temperature, so it could be seeing that she's so light, she's trying to like blow herself up.
Yep. Yeah, there's a number of other lizard species that can change their color depending on if they want to warm up or cool down or that kind of thing. So, yeah, color is cool. It's a whole field of research on color variation and all these different factors that can influence the colors of an animal. Good. All right, iguanas. I talked about these guys on Wednesday as well. They're a very speciose group of lizards, and we had some examples of common lizards in this group that you might have heard of. Iguana, the green iguana, which is super common in the pet trade, and then the brown anole, Anolis sagrii, the green anole, Anolis carolinensis, very common both in the pet trade and in the wild in the southeast U.S. I also wanted to mention that a subgroup of this family is called Phrynosomatidea. There we are. And there is one species in Ohio from this subgroup. This is a slide that I accidentally deleted from my lecture on Wednesday. I want to make sure you have. So make sure you have this Galaparous Undulatus. This is the eastern fence lizard found in places in kind of southern Ohio mostly. But they have a really broad range from Central America up to Canada, although there's some dispute if it's actually all one species or not. They generally live in pretty arid environments. And they're pretty small little guys. They're like this big, and they're very conspicuous. They come and they bask on rocks and fences, as you might guess from the name, and things like that. Within this group, there are some oviparous and viviparous lizards. The species here, Galaparous Undulatus, is oviparous. They lay eggs. So we do have one lizard in Iguanidae here in Ohio. And we'll see, we have a bunch of these guys in jars that you'll see later this semester. We'll talk about them more in detail.
I think on that table in the front is Galaparous.
All right, in front of Carissa there?
No, the other one, the big one. Oh, okay, I lied. Maybe on that one.
Do we have, are those Galaparous there? I can't tell what they are.
I don't know. Just on one of these tables,
Oh, yeah,
there are definitely some.
Oh, here we go. Yeah, these guys here. Yep. So you can see what they look like here. You can actually pass this around. Is this Undulatus? Do you know, Princeton?
I have no idea.
You can look it up. But these are Galaparous lizards anyway in this jar here. You can take that and pass it around. All right, we also talked about geckos. I'm not going to go over this again. I went over this on Wednesday. I don't have new information, but just remember that we do have one non-native species of gecko in Ohio. That is this guy, the Mediterranean gecko, Hemidactylus triticus. These guys are found many places around the world where they're not native. So we got geckos, and then did I cover varanids on Wednesday? Okay, this is new. So another family that we are talking about is Varanidae. These are commonly known as monitor lizards. Sid, go ahead. Phrenicometidae. Okay. The horned lizards are in this family too. What commonly called horny toads. Oh yeah, we've got some. Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's right. Those are nice ones. They're in Phrenicometidae, yep. It includes horned lizards and Galaparous. All right, so Varanidae is commonly called monitor lizards. You've all heard of these, I'm sure. Iguanas are also in this group. These are, I would say, of the lizards, they're the most mammal-like. And by that, I mean that they're the most active. They're active foragers. They have high levels of endurance for running capacity. Most of them are carnivorous, but there are some omnivorous or herbivorous species of monitors as well. And they live in a variety of warm habitats through Africa, Asia, and Australia. Some of them can climb trees really well. Some of them are really good swimmers. They actually have a respiratory system in structure that's similar to what we see in birds and crocodilians. In it, they have this unidirectional airflow, which basically means their lungs are more efficient, so they can run for longer distances, fueled by this aerobic capacity. And that's pretty unusual amongst lizards. Most lizards can sprint really fast for a short distance, and then they totally tucker out after that, because they can rely on their anaerobic metabolism to sprint these short distances, but they don't have much aerobic capacity. And so once they do that initial sprint, they kind of peter out. These guys are the exception. The most famous of this group is, of course, the Komodo Dragon, Varanus komodoensis, the biggest living lizard in the world. They're giant. They have some, do they have any of these guys at zoos nearby? I don't know if the Columbus. Okay, so lots of these. Okay, yeah. So you can check it out. Yeah. They're super neat animals. Oh man, they're really cool. They are also venomous, and we'll talk about that more when we get into venom as well. And they can inflict a nasty bite, and there's some venom, and there's also bacteria that they spread, and then their prey slowly dies, and then they go and eat it. And they can hunt in groups, and they can eat pretty big ungulates and stuff like that too. Question, Sid. Mm-hmm. So we breathe in, and then we breathe out, and the air is always going in, and then it goes to a dead end, and then it comes back out. These guys have a lung structure, without getting into all the details, that basically allows it to kind of cycle continuously. And so what that allows them to do is they can kind of continuously be breathing in and out without inhaling. They still inhale and exhale, but the air the way the airflow goes, it's more efficient in terms of gas exchange. It's really neat. Birds have this, some crocodilians have this, or all crocodilians actually. Not sure if it's all or some, but yeah. Chase.
I was wondering, so they have some of them are.
Yes. Yep.
So, are the ones that are venomous, are they in captivity?
Yes.
So, how do keepers not die? That's what I said. Like, I don't know. Like,
I mean, I don't know zookeeping, but as with any dangerous animal, you do things carefully. So you can die from, you can have a snake this big that's venomous that could kill you if it bites you, or a Komodo dragon, or a polar bear.
so I know that like this may sound really stupid, but like skunks, you can get their like stink removed, like their sock, whatever. Is that possible at all?
With snakes, you can remove the venom sacs. It's pretty invasive surgery, but it's possible. With these guys, I don't know what the anatomical structure is, if you would be able to do that or not. But with these guys, honestly, like, your concern with these guys isn't going to be the venom. Your concern is going to be getting bit and mauled if they decide that they want to go for you. So, it's like if someone told you a polar bear was venomous, that's not going to change how careful you are on a polar bear, right? So, yeah, let's see. I've got McKenna and then a bunch of other hands. Go ahead, McKenna.
But there are some animals that they can interact directly, like whether it's for the purpose of like enrichment or like feeding them, but most of the time they will remove the and
Right.
Like it's not normally there's some other place where they can put it in, like putting into like anything or place food. Like they're not in there all the time.
Yeah, you're not gonna hop in there with a Komodo dragon. Yeah. And if you have specific questions about handling venomous snakes too, when Dr. Mason's in with us starting next week, he'd be happy to chat about that. It's not an area that I know very well at all. So, yeah, thanks, McKenna. Ethan, go ahead.
You want me to answer? I have worked with others.
Yeah.
So at the Toledo Zoo, I worked a bit with them, and we would just jump in there sometimes with them. But we had trained ours, so we had a little green laser pointer, and they were trained that if they were to go to it, they'd receive a food reward. So we get them used to like going in there and working with them and have people in there. But then if we need to, we can then like point the green laser at their like their side enclosure, and that way they'll go in there. But then when there are people in there and working with them, you always have like two people in there at the same time that can then wrangle the Komodo with like long sticks to kind of keep it and it takes interest in you. I had one once. I was feeding it, and I accidentally showed it the food, and it started to come towards me, thinking I was the food item. But let me tell you, that's pretty scary too. And then in that case, it was just like move the Komodo over, and then everybody leaves and just like reset its system.
Right. So just get away from And these guys have the added, well, not these guys. Dimension. They're not only venomous, but they're big, right? So you have multiple things going on. Like the venomous snake, generally they're going to be in a small enclosure or whatever. Cool. Yeah. Unfortunately, take care of a lot of these things in captivities is not my area, so I'm not going to really answer questions very well about that stuff. But I've got others who can. Go ahead, Sam.
I don't know necessarily if this is the most accurate way of describing this, but I thought I had heard that at least with Komodo dragons, they weren't venomous, but they had like bacteria, like bacterial growth in their mouths, and that was the most dangerous stuff, right?
Yes, that is true, and they are venomous. So they previously, this is actually pretty new research in the past 5-ish years maybe, where researchers describe them and realize that they are actually venomous in addition to like that bacteria that can cause infection. So what they do is they would bite their prey, and then they would just like leave it, and over the course of a couple of days, it would die, largely because of the infection that they kind of passed on through the bite and the bacteria that they'd inoculate the wound with, but also they're venomous too. So so that was what was commonly believed up until pretty recently. So. Sid?
So I know that the dragons are venomous in one bacteria, but are other one of their lizards venomous?
Not defining, not universal, but other ones do, and I don't know which do and which don't. Yeah, and we'll actually, as we learn more about venom, we'll see that venom's actually a lot more common, in snakes and lizards than we previously thought. So it's pretty cool. Just wasn't necessarily the kind of venom that we were looking for. Yep. Huh, that's a good question. What's the point of having both? My guess is that it just provides a double mechanism to sedate your prey, right? And if one doesn't work, the other will, or they work in conjunction with each other to basically slow things down.
Yeah, from what I've heard,
Yeah.
I mean, because of just how big they are and like how much energy they have to spend to try and track down their prey and stuff. I mean, obviously they're scavengers, but like to get a live meal, it guarantees the pill basically that they can eat.
So it's more effective, yeah. Sam, go ahead.
When I kill someone with venom, is that like a sort of like eat right away type thing, or is it like this guy's starting with that thing, or is it like they wait either way, whether it's the bacteria or the venom?
In both cases, it takes a while, so they have to let it go, and then they'll basically find it again and then eat it once it dies. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's how it works with a lot of even more fast-acting. So, for example, rattlesnakes eating rodents or something, they'll envenomate the rodent and then it'll run off, and then they'll track it and find it and then eat it. It's cool stuff. It's pretty neat. And we'll actually read that paper we're going to read for Monday is on venom and the evolution of venom in vipers, depending on what their prey is. So it's a cool study. They injected snake venom into scorpions. It's like super metal. Okay, skinks. Skinkidae. There are 3 Ohio species in this family, so it is the most speciose family in terms of what we find here in Ohio. They're usually diurnal, pretty active. They can live in a variety of habitats. They have these very like slick, smooth scales. If anyone's ever held a skink, not all skinks, but most of them have this very slick scale surface. And this is because there's the scale structure. Partially, they're very slick, but they're also kind of hard because they're underlaid by something called osteoderms, which is bone tissue that develops underneath the scale tissue. Some species in this family have very small limbs or no limbs at all. They're legless lizards in this family, and they have these tails that often break off very easily and can deter a predator. And so the example I have here is Plestiodon fasciatus, the 5-line skink. I've not seen one in Ohio, but I'm hoping to soon. They live down in the area where we do some research with our wall lizards. And there are 2 other species that live here in Ohio as well. We'll get into that detail later, but that's my example for our skinks. Very, very diverse group of lizards found around the world, a variety of habitats. There's some skinks that actually have family units and have very complex social structures that they're studying in Australia. Really neat stuff. I can barely contain my excitement because the next slide is my favorite. Can you guess what it is? No, we're saving turtles for last. We already did geckos. Wall lizard, here it is, family Lizardidae. So these guys are often not, or they're not native to, go back a slide, yep. I know, I gave it away. It's like
It's my favorite.
Yeah, Princeton and I can represent. You should have said that because then we could have introduced. Because now it's Princeton's slide next, and people would have guessed what it is. Sid, go ahead.
I was just gonna ask for the skinks. I know the prehensile tail skink.
Mm-hmm.
Common for their tails to break off. I'm assuming not.
Not for the prehensile tail. No. Those guys would have different muscular and skeletal structure in their tails, and it would be much more costly for them to lose their tails than.
So are they like morphologically different than with the tails?
Very much so. Yep.
What are the 3 species?
Oh, they're Plestiodon fasciatus, and then there's the, oh God, you're quizzing me, Sam. The northern prairie skink, which is Plestiodon septentrionalis, and then the third one is what? Broad-headed skink, yes. Breviceps, is that the species name? Here, Princeton's gonna look it up and tell us.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
Let me see.
Yeah, Prince is gonna look it up and tell us.
So I guess the osteoderms are like kind of like bones underneath the scales.
They are bones underneath the scales. Yep. And so alligators, crocodiles have these guys as well. It's what gives their bone. Actually, I don't have any osteoderms with my skeleton here. But yeah, it's not like bones. It is bones that grow underneath each scale. All right, we'll get back to
Plastidon laticeps.
Laticeps. Oh, so close. That's the broad-headed skink. And then the northern prairie skink is Plastidon septentrionalis. Is that right? I'm almost positive. Yeah. And then this guy. Yep.
There's a park that I went to not that long ago that was like some on this like marshy, boggy area that was filled with skinks. And I want to say it was Northern Plains skinks.
Ooh.
But I'm not entirely certain because I didn't have like a little field guide with me at the time.
Yeah.
But because of the way that like the ground was partially wet, the path was raised, and so you could like peek down there with the skink crawling around underneath the path.
What?
I don't remember where this park was.
Oh my gosh, you have to find out and tell me.
I should ask my dad. I was
Yes.
hiking there with my dad.
Yeah, please do. Actually, I would love to check it out. I'm new to Ohio, and so I don't know a lot of places to find cool stuff yet. I'm like learning a lot, so I would love to get the skinny on that. Yeah. All right. Princeton's favorite, Lacertidae. This is a family of lizards that's mostly found in the Old World, although there are some North American species. They are often small or medium-sized animals. They're very conspicuous in many cases. They live out in like cities, and they live in places where they're very obvious. They love to get out and bask in the sun. You can find them in like big cities. Like I've seen these guys like in parks in the middle of Rome, for example. Like they're very good at living in urban areas. Most of them lay eggs, but a few give live birth. And the species you see here, Pedersus moralis, the common wall lizard, was introduced to Cincinnati in 1951. You're going to learn all about these guys in detail as the semester goes on. But the gist of it is a kid went to Italy for vacation with his family. He brought like 10 of them back and released them in his backyard. And now there are hundreds of thousands, if not millions of them across the city of Cincinnati. And there are the lizard, the primary study organism that we study in our lab. And redback salamanders. But mostly these guys. And sand skinks. But mostly these guys. Yeah, well, actually, you're going to learn a ton about these later in the semester. I won't get into too much detail now. So one species here in Ohio, not native. And also recently discovered population of them in Columbus, but not for long. And that's a story for another day. Oh, yeah. All right, I have one more slide I want to go through, and then we'll take our break. I know we're a little bit past time. We normally take our break. So bear with me for one more slide. Yes. Boop. Last one. I just want to talk about these guys broadly. Amphizvanians. Remember, this is a clade within lizards. They are a monophyletic clade. There's about 180 species around the world in 5 families. None of them are in Ohio. They generally live in tropical regions. They're commonly referred to as worm lizards, though they are neither worms nor lizards, technically. They're pretty small, subterranean. They have for these guys are interesting. It's an example of how one of the differences, even though these guys look very similar morphologically to snakes in a lot of ways, it's actually the right lung that's reduced rather than the left lung, which is the lung that's reduced in snakes. I was talking about how in snakes we find one functional and one vestigial lung. In these guys, it's flipped. And they can move backwards, which is kind of cool. They can crawl forwards and backwards. We're not going to talk about these guys too much in class for a couple reasons. One is there's not that many of them. 2 is there's not that much known about them. They're really understudied, and there's just not a ton of research on these guys. And so beyond characterizing them in terms of their relationships amongst each other, we just don't know that much about these guys, right? They live underground in the tropics, but there's not too much to know. And so the example I have here is Blanus strachii, which is the Turkish worm lizard. No species in Ohio. We won't spend a lot of time on this, but for the sake of completion, I wanted to round out our lizards and our well, I should say more clearly, our squamate discussion with these guys. They are absolutely squamates, yep. They're a highly derived group of lizards. So you can think of them as like similar to snakes in that they're clade within lizards. Lisa, you've got a puzzled look on your face.
They're awkwardly similar looking to Saltwater.
Superficially, from this photo, I can see where you'd see that. If you saw one, you probably wouldn't think that because they have dry, scaled skin like a lizard rather than that smooth, kind of slimy skin like an amphibian. But superficially, they're annulated. They have these rings, and this species that I picked in particular does look a lot like that. So, yep. But they're much more lizard-like if you look closely. And that's a wrap for squamates. So let's take a 5-minute break. Well, let's take a 3.5-minute break. Is that fair compromise? No. Whoa. Class. Yeah. We should totally go. Really? That's all iNatural stuff? That's awesome. Oh, I'd love to do that. I've never seen one here in Ohio. So. All right, we've got 40 minutes left in class. I'm debating if I want to color Crocodilians today or not. Sorry, did I say color? We're gonna spend the rest of the class coloring alligator pictures. I know what I'll do. This is what we're gonna do. We're gonna transition. I'm gonna cover a couple other things I want to cover. If we have time, we might cover crocs. Might come back and cover crocs at the end of class. And if not, then we'll just get the crocs next class. Sound okay? So crocodilians are big. Don't mess with them, and they don't make boots out of them either. Okay, great. The end. Okay. So I want to introduce to you this semester. You're going to have 3 primary literature assignments, and the idea of these assignments is that you're going to read manuscripts that are in the literature, so in the scientific literature, and you're going to understand and evaluate them. And we're going to do this 3 times this semester. The first one, we're all going to do the same paper, and this ties into our topic of class beginning next week on venom and venom evolution. After that, you will pick the topics, and we'll talk more. Those of you that are interested, as you saw on Wednesday, some of those summaries that you read were authored by OWU students, some of whom you know. If you're interested in doing that and submitting to have your summary published, you'll have the opportunity to do that as well. But the first one, we're going to do the same paper. We're going to do it all together. And that paper is titled The Coevolution of Diet and Prey-Specific Venom Activity Supports the Role of Selection in Snake Venom Evolution. If I was to put that in more easily digestible terms, no pun intended, it would be snakes that eat scorpions have venom that works better on scorpions. That's the takeaway message. And you'll see how they arrived at that conclusion. It's a really nice study that combines a lot of ideas we'll talk about in class. And it deals with vipers in this genus called, I'm not sure if it's pronounced Echis or Echis, or Echis, I have no idea actually, but Echis, Echis carinatus and Echis ocellatus. I wanted you to see what these guys look like. And basically what they did is they looked at the diet of these guys in the wild, and then they used the venom on different prey items and saw the relationship between the venom and the prey item. Your assignment with this is worth a total of 25 class points, so note that it's worth like almost as much as a quiz. And I want to just walk you through it right now. So this paper is up in Blackboard right now, and I'm going to pull up if I have it. I'm going to pull up your assignment and just walk through it with you. Just give me 1 second to pull it up here. Oops. And so the assignment looks like this. Basically, you're going to use that guide. You have the guide How to Read a Research Paper that you used when you read that paper on mudpuppies, for example. So you'll use that as a guide, and you'll read the paper. And as you do, you're going to answer a set of questions thoughtfully and kind of in complete sentence. And this is something you're going to proofread before you hand in. So the first question is just to include a citation for your paper. I don't care what format you cite things in this class, as long as you're consistent, right? And it's really a bit of a misnomer. Maybe in other fields it's different, but at least for ecology and evolutionary biology, there's no set format for paper citations. Every journal has a different format, which is kind of a nightmare and a headache if you're trying to like change a manuscript for a different journal or whatever. But I don't care what you do, as long as all the information's there and you are the same, you use the same format like in a paper. This one doesn't matter, you're only gonna do one, but cite that. Number 2 is I want you to pick 2 terms from the paper that are new to you that you didn't know and define them. So you can just list those terms and define them. Notice that this is the exception here for complete, I said answer in complete sentences, except for definitions. I guess I should have said except for your citation too. And then some of these questions will look familiar from the mudpuppy assignment. What was actually measured, and meaning what data were collected? What is a specific question you have about the methods? What do you think is the strength of the paper? What do you think is a weakness of the paper, and maybe how it could be improved? And what is an idea for a follow-up experiment or a continuation of this? All of that should seem pretty familiar to you so far. Let me pause there and see what questions you have before I talk about number 8 there. Okay, number 8 is you're going to write a paragraph, 1 to 2 paragraph summary of the paper following the format of the current research that you just dissected for your last assignment. And now you have a list of like important characteristics you should include. You can use that list you created with your group and make sure you're hitting all of those points as you write a 1 to 2 paragraph summary. The first draft of this is going to be worth 8 points. We're going to either do a workshop in class or you're going to get some feedback, and then you'll have a chance to revise it, and that will be for 4 more points. So it's a little bit more of an involved writing assignment where you have a first draft, you get some feedback, and you do a second draft, and altogether the whole primary lit assignment is 25 points. It's due by Monday, and there's a Google form here you can go to. And what you're going to do is you're going to submit this by putting a link to a Google document in this form. So you're going to do this whole assignment in a Google Doc, and then you're going to send me a link to that Google Doc. And that way I can get access to it. I can make comments on it really easily, and then you can incorporate those comments in a revision. Just kind of makes things easier for all of us. It's kind of more efficient than doing it on paper too. So this form is, all it is just 2 questions. It's your name and then a link, provide a link to your Google Doc. And then there's the usual question at the bottom where you can write whatever you want if you want. That's the gist of this assignment for next week. And like I said, this is going to launch us into our discussion of Venom and Venom evolution that will start on Monday next week. What questions do you have? Oh, that is a great question. You can set up your Google Doc so that you could just, well, you can do one of 2 things. You can, what's the best way to do it? If you would just set up your Google Doc so that anyone with the link can read and edit it, that would be the easiest thing to do, actually. That would be actually great, because then I could look at it. If Dr. Mason is looking at these with the Venom stuff, then he can get access to it. So yeah, please do that. That would be the best. And just make my life easier so I don't have to go through and get 30 some odd emails about someone shared a Google Doc with you. Not that I don't like getting emails that you've shared things with me, but you know. Yeah, thanks for asking this, Sam. It's a great logistical question. I hadn't thought that through all the way. Other questions? Okay, next thing I want to cover is, let me go back to my slides here. Whoops. All right, our mud puppy trip tomorrow. I want to just go over some of the logistical details here. The first thing I have to say is that I'm not 100% sure we're going to be able to go. Water is really high right now, and Ryan, the researcher we're going to meet with, is going out tonight, and he's going to let me know if it's a go tonight. So I will let you know by tomorrow morning if we are going to go or not. In the meantime, we're going to prepare and plan as if we're going to go. If it's canceled, we'll just have normal class on Wednesday. And by normal, just to be clear, I mean like the normally awesome class on Wednesday, like not a normal class, Like it's still gonna be awesome, but just like the normal awesome, not like the super mud puppy awesome. But let's plan on going. Again, there'll be an evening and a day trip for this. I'm going to reference right now this survey, and I'll actually just put this up to make sure that we can accommodate everyone. I've got 25 responses, so there's a couple of you that didn't do this survey. I'll have to figure that out. But what I want to look at is in the evening, I've got 10 of you are going to go in the Obu van, which is great because I have a 12-passenger van plus me, so I can accommodate 11. And then a couple people are going to drive yourself. What I will do, those of you driving yourself, I will send a link via Google Maps to where we're going to go. What I'd like you to do is to meet us here. Well, does that make sense? To meet here and drive down, or just meet us there? Because are you coming, those of you that are driving, will you be coming from campus, or are you coming from like elsewhere where it's a pain to go to campus first and then go down there?
I would be coming from elsewhere, but that could be
Okay. What I will do is this, is those of you that are driving separately, I will put a link in the group me to where we're going. And here you can see, hold on. We are departing Owu at 6 p.m., so we're going to meet there at 6:30. So if you're driving separately, you can just plan on meeting us down there at 6:30. The rest of us will meet here in the parking lot, and we're going to meet, where's this room? We're going to meet in the Science Center parking lot at 6 o'clock and go down there. I'm going to get some boots and waders and stuff and disinfectant. I'll talk to you about that. Those of you that are going separately, well, I guess we'll bring some waders for you. Not everyone necessarily needs waders. If you're driving separately and you think you want waders, talk to me. We'll figure that out. Ethan, question. Yeah, I've got some waders we can bring. What I was going to do is just bring an assortment of them, and we can sort out who wants to use them and switch them off if we need to. Okay. Does that sound okay? So that's good. Is anybody, okay, this is an important question. There's 10 of you are riding in the Obu van. Did anybody not respond to the survey that's planning on riding in the Obu van with me tomorrow night? Lennon, you are?
I submitted my thing earlier. I don't know if it.
Alan, you submitted this twice.
I wasn't sure if the first one went through, so it didn't. Yeah. But I reclaimed the same, so it should have been the same. So,
Oh yeah, Lennon got it. Yeah, but what'll happen? What are you doing tomorrow?
driving myself.
You're driving. Okay, so that doesn't matter. Okay, the important thing is the van. Okay, so that means that we have one extra space in the van. So, okay, and then for Tuesday, let's see, we've got only 7 of you going, and a bunch of people not going. 10, but drive yourself 5. So we want to make sure this adds up. This is 10 plus 15 plus 7 is 22. Okay, that adds up. Okay. So that should be good. So Wednesday we'll just need 1 van then as well. Can I go ahead?
I answered that I was going to both.
Okay.
Some other people may have done that, so that could maybe some of the.
Oh, wait, yeah, wasn't there a response for our Regeneration code?
Well, no, I asked you for each one if you were going or not. So if you're going to go to both, then you should have just selected both for both, right? It's kind of important that we have these numbers, right? Because I don't want to show up and not have room for everybody. But it looks like we've got a little wiggle room, so we're okay. Go ahead, Ethan.
For the trip on Wednesday,
Mm-hmm.
regardless if we're driving by yourself, are we still meeting here, or is it the same situation? Where we just
Oh, on Wednesday. Good question. I'm glad you asked that. On Wednesday, we can just meet down there as well. And we'll meet down there at about 2:30. So I'll send that link out via GroupMe as well. So I'm going to communicate for trip via the GroupMe group. If you haven't signed up for that, Princeton can help you get hooked up with that. But make sure on there, because any field trip type stuff is going to get communicated on there. For the trip, what I will do is I'm going to look at this list and see who these 10 people are. And then for tomorrow night, I'm going to have that list and kind of be expecting you there. So if you fill this out and your preference has changed, please let me know via text message or whatever, or GroupMe message. You can just message me directly. But make sure I know that. Otherwise, I'm going to be waiting around for somebody that's not going to show up, and then that's going to make me grumpy. So those 10 people, it's fine to change your plan. You just need to let me know what you're doing. Does that sound okay? It just gets complicated trying to get 30 people down to a different spot. So Okay, and then same goes for these 7 folks here. So those of you driving yourself, you figure that out. And I'll let you coordinate with each other if you're gonna do that. Okay, good. That was fun. All right, what other questions? Actually, let me go over a few other things for the field trip, and then we'll take some questions if you got them. So here's some expectations and protocols for our field trips generally, but for tomorrow specifically. We're gonna be outside for like an hour or so. It's cold out. Tomorrow the highs supposed to be, it's really beautiful today. See what we can go today. Tomorrow the weather's supposed to be chillier in the highs in the 20s. So just be prepared to be outside for that amount of time. Bring water, snacks if you want. We'll be gone for a couple hours, so I don't know. I'll get hungry. What I'm asking you to do is make sure, I want to be clear that when we do our outings that you don't have to do anything that you feel uncomfortable or unsafe with. But I do expect you to be present and participating, even if, for example, you don't want to hold the snake that we catch or something like that. Not catching a snake tomorrow, but that's the idea. Anytime you touch an amphibian, you have to have gloves on. We're going to talk about pathogens and diseases and things like that later in the semester, but we never handle amphibians with bare skin hands. So please be mindful of that. We're going to disinfect all of your footwear too. I will have bleach spray. We're just going to spray on the bottom of your shoes so we don't transmit any potential pathogens from site to site or anything like that. Lennon, I'll get you in 1 second. If you're not sure about anything, just ask. I want to make sure that if we're ever out in the field and you're just not clear on what you should do or where you should be or anything, just ask me. That's the best way to go, or Princeton for that matter. So just don't do something if you're not sure about it. Lennon, question.
You have special gloves for us to use there, right?
Yeah, I'll bring gloves. Although we're not really going to be handling the mud puppies any, but I'll bring some gloves anyway. But on other trips, like when we go see salamanders or frogs, we'll want our gloves when we handle any of those guys. Mm-hmm. Yep, and I'll take care of all that. Yeah, thanks for asking that. Yeah, you don't have to worry about bringing that stuff. It's a good note for me to make sure we get that. Other questions about the trip? Yep, sit.
Yeah, for dressing warm, this is kind of a dumb question, I don't know, but do we need to be able to have like clothes that we can move well in?
Yeah, so what to expect is we're going to be parking at a parking lot. It's like a spillway of the dam, so it's like a very open public area. Like we're not going to a wilderness area. Let me make that clear. It's like a parking lot next to the road, next to a dam. And then along that, there's like picnic benches and stuff, but then there's a bunch of riffraff, like a bunch of rocks and stuff. And we're going to be kind of walking down on those rocks. There's actually like a path that goes along there too. And then to the extent that you want to put on waders and get in the shallow water, you can do that, or you can kind of stand up on the rocks. So it's not a long hike. It's not like out in the woods or anything like that. It's not going to be muddy, but it will be obviously some snow and some ice. And then we get along the shore of the creek, it'll be ice and water and stuff. Yeah. Yeah, unfortunately, we're not going to. It's weird. When I first heard that, the first time I went there, I was like, oh, mud puppies. This is going to be in some pristine place out in the wilderness away from everything. And no, like it's under these like bright lights in this park. Like it's about as not wildernessy as you can really imagine. But there's mud puppies there. Good. Other questions? You guys are great. I can't wait to do this stuff. Okay, Sam, go ahead. Yeah, what we'll do is we'll check out, so especially the evening trip, they're nocturnal, and so we'll go out there. Oh, shoot, this is an important thing that I forgot to mention. Bring, those of you going tomorrow evening, bring a flashlight or headlamp. I'm really glad you said that. I meant to mention that. I have some extras. I'll bring some that I have. The lab, I have some in the lab, but make sure if you have one, bring it. And so, Sam, to answer your question, we'll be walking along the water, looking for them in the water, which is really cool, and you'll see them in their natural habitat. They have some traps that we'll check as well. And then there may be the opportunity, like you don't really catch them you catch them either with a net or in a trap. So you don't actually, it's not an animal that you catch by hand anyway. And then they're going to have some, assuming we catch some on Tuesday, then Wednesday he's going to keep some in buckets for us to look at. And then of course there's a chance to talk to Ryan about his research and all that as well. And you all have questions to ask him based on the activity we did a couple weeks ago. Mm-hmm. Actually, which we should have, that we haven't revisited that, have we? Maybe we should do that today instead of talking about crocodilians. Yeah. Okay. What's that? Yeah, yeah. So revisit your question. Make sure you come with your questions for Ryan as well. Talk to him about this stuff.
Oh, that's the one, like, the whole, like,
Yeah, we did the group activities. Yep. And we thought we were going to go on the trip earlier. So yeah, and I will let you know. I will send a message to the class via Blackboard tomorrow morning if we're going to go or not. I don't know. Probably 50-50. Yeah, in all honesty. I just don't. It just depends on how high the water is and the conditions are, what they're like there. So. Oh, we're either going to go Tuesday, Wednesday, or not go at all. We won't go just one or the other. Yeah, probably. Yeah, that's how it goes. I mean, it's frustrating, but that's just the way it is with this stuff because yeah. So it'll be all right. We'll get there eventually. They're out. I mean, they're active year round, so we got all spring. Nothing else is going to be active for at least another month, so it's not like we're backing up into other field trip territory or whatever. So that's cool. I would like to go. I wanted to go as soon as possible, but it just doesn't work. All right, what do we got? We got 20 minutes left. I got a few other quick things to cover here. I'm going to talk about crocodilians. Let's do this. Let's go back. It's not a long lecture. This is going to be less than 10 minutes on crocs. And then I'll wrap things up with your quizzes. Get those back to you. So looking back at our terrestrial vertebrate phylogeny, remember that crocodilians are in this group with birds, and they are what's called archosaurs. So let's put this up here. And we'll get to this when we talk more about prehistoric reptiles. Archosaur. I'm just going to put crocs plus birds. So remember that crocodilians and birds are each other's most closely related living relatives, and that the next closest group is actually turtles. So that means that turtles are more closely related to birds than they are to squamates, snakes and lizards, which is counterintuitive in a lot of ways because birds seem like they're very different compared to turtles, but they're in fact this is the sister group to crocodilians and birds, which is called archosaurs. Question, Lisa, you had your hand up?
I just can't see.
Oh, it's blue. So you can't see blue chalk on a black chalkboard with no light? Man. Yeah, so that's bad teaching right there. Prince, would you throw me that white chalk, please?
Yeah. Probably not the best idea.
Archosaur, there we go. Is that better? Yeah, thanks for saying that, sorry. All right, so let's talk about crocodilians. There are 0 species in Ohio, although I did see a news article 2 summers ago, they found an alligator in a river somewhere in Ohio that someone had released. Actually, a school group of preschoolers was down in this park playing by the river, and someone saw an alligator and they flipped their shit, as you would imagine. Anyway, there's 3 families of crocodilians. They are Gavialidae, Alligatoridae, and Crocodilidae. Most of these guys, unfortunately, are threatened or endangered. They're found generally through the tropics around the world. They're known for their heavy armor, right? They have like these elongate bodies. They have those osteoderms under their scales. So their scales are really bony and they have these protrusions. They have, in some cases, these really long snouts. They have super powerful tails and limbs. They're big beasts. The saltwater crocodile is the largest living reptile. They're famous for a reason for what they are, right? We have a couple species here in the US, specifically the American alligator that you see here. Actually not endangered, in fact, quite common across the southeastern United States, through South Carolina, Georgia, Florida, and that area. There's a lot of them. You can find them in golf courses, especially if you ever go golfing. Did you really? Yeah. Yeah, they're like pretty ubiquitous, and they can cause well, it's not their fault really. We're encroaching on their habitat, but there's some sad stories about people getting too close or not really respecting the fact that there's alligators. There's a story from a couple years ago in like Disney World, at one of the resorts. There was like a wetland area, and there was all of these signs: do not go near alligators, all these signs, and some family let their like 3-year-old go near the water and the kid got eaten. It was terrible. Lennon, go ahead.
I've seen a bunch of videos of people just like taking alligators and just throwing them in the water online.
Throwing them in the water?
Yeah, they'll just like, people just literally grab them and just walk over and throw them back in the water.
Huh. And it for fun?
Yeah.
Okay. Don't recommend it. Don't even small alligators can pack a bite. They're cool. I actually had one in my this is that we had a baby alligator living in our bathtub for a while. We were rescuing it and going to send it to this preserve, and they're like really cute and they chirp for their mom. It's adorable. Yeah, baby alligators are awesome. So historically, what we see now, we have a couple dozen living alligator species in the world, but this is just a fraction of the diversity of this family. And when we get to our prehistoric reptiles, I'll talk about these. But prehistorically, there was all these friggin' crazy alligators. Some of them were completely terrestrial, like the Postosuchus you see here. Some of them were these even huger than saltwater crocs. Now this is a Sarcosuchus, some of the largest living reptiles outside of dinosaurs in our planet's history. These guys actually ate dinosaurs. So huge diversity of crocodilians in the past. And so keep in mind that what we're seeing now with just a couple dozen species left is only a fraction of what used to be around. Mm-hmm.
So, okay, the alligators and the crocodiles are part of the same, or, yeah, part of the same family. So then, are they like?
Well, these are actually separate families within Crocodilia. But yeah, they're the same group, the same clade. Yep. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so let's talk about these guys generally. The Gavialidae, commonly known as Gavials or Gharials. There's only 2 species, and they have these very elongate snouts that they use to catch fish. As they get older, the snout kind of thins out, which is kind of interesting. And it comes from the word meaning pot, because at the end of the male snout, they have this like bulbous structure. I'm not sure actually what it does morphologically. These guys are found in Southeast Asia. So Gavials or Gharials. Not in Ohio.
How big are they?
These guys, they're not quite as big as alligators or crocs, but they're sizable. I don't have numbers in front of me, but they're big. Alligators, or Alligatoridae, includes alligators and caimans, which are primarily in the New World, but not exclusively. There's 4 genera. You see here a little baby caiman. Here's alligator, the American alligator. They get quite large. You can tell, well, this is a terrible picture to show you, but the way that their teeth articulate with their jaw distinguishes alligators from crocodilians, and specifically the teeth of the lower jaw fit into a pit in the upper jaw, which you can't really see that well here. Then you have Crocodilidae. There's only 2 genera of these guys. These guys, you can see how this tooth on the lower jaw, you can see it when the mouth is closed. That's a distinguishing character between crocs and alligators. This includes the saltwater crocodile, Crocodilus porosus, which is the largest living reptile. They live in northern Australia and areas around there. They're really, really big. I have a link to a video here. It doesn't do you much good in a PowerPoint, but we'll get to that, actually. We'll cover all these guys in a little more detail when we get to our unit on prehistoric. I keep referencing this future prehistoric reptile unit. I'm not just like building up anticipation. It's going to be awesome. You need me to go back to Alligatoridae. Yep. That's all I'm going to say about alligators, or crocodilians, sorry, for the moment anyway. Again, we're mostly going to focus on species native to Ohio, so I want you to be aware of these diversity of reptiles around the globe, but generally we're going to focus on these Ohio species. There is an American crocodile as well, not to be confused with the American alligator, that live primarily in saltwater off the coast of Florida, and there's not many of them left at all, like a couple hundred, I think, or something. Very, very few. They're highly endangered animals. So most of these guys are endangered simply because they've lost territory. They're just humans have taken over the places where they've lived.
You said before that the saltwater or the American crocodile wasn't endangered any longer.
Alligator.
Oh, is that what you meant?
Yeah, American alligator is not endangered. There's tons of them. American crocodile, however, is.
Did they recently bring them off the endangered species?
American crocodile? I don't think so. If they did, that was not. And there's not that many of them left at all. Like very, very few. Question, Sam.
I don't know if it was stupid or not, but I'm gonna ask it anyway.
Yeah, do it.
Like, you know how like you know in the biology, like there's like Pedersus and then the crocodile.
Hmm?
Yeah. So like, I don't know if I'm remembering correctly, but don't they like all have like the same like origin as like Pedersus?
Ah, yes.
Is that in any of the other people?
Yeah.
I mean, maybe not mammals. You know what I mean?
No, so we have 4-chambered hearts in Crocodilia, birds, and mammals there. And then there's some variation here. These guys generally have like 3-chamber, or well, 2.5. It's complicated, but something intermediate anyway, right? And then amphibians generally have a 3-chamber heart. So yep. So their hearts. That's one of the anatomical features that they share in common with birds. Crocs are also cool. One thing I didn't say here is they exhibit a lot of parental care. The moms take great care of their babies. In fact, they'll like pick up the babies with their mouth. It's awesome. See this huge, fearsome animal like picking up these tiny little babies, and they'll move around. They have like crocodile nurseries and stuff like that.
For like the entire 3 families, or just for certain?
What's
Like the 3 families of crocodiles? Like for all of them?
That's all there is. Yep. There's only like 24 species of crocodilians.
Sorry, I think they all
I believe so. Yeah. Yep. I'm not 100% sure, but if not all of them, most of them. All right, that's all I got for Crocs. I want to wrap things up here. I talked about field work. Quiz number 1 was due last week. I'm giving it back to you today. I will do this with all of your assessments and show you a histogram of scores so you know kind of how the class did as a whole and where you sit. So this is out of 20 points possible. The class mean was a 15.8, which is, let's round that to 16. So that's about an 80%, a little shy of 80%. Histogram was really kind of surprising. So to read this, this is a grade that somebody got on an exam, and this is the number of people on the y-axis that got that grade. And so if we look up here, 10 of you, almost like more than a third of the class, got basically a perfect score on this exam. Another 3 people got between a 16 and 18, and you can read from there. I want to present this information because it helps. I think it helps you identify how you're doing in the class. Because if your grade is down here, then you might think about how you approach this quiz, how you prepared for it, and try to get yourself up here. The second thing that's interesting is normally, when you see scores for a test, it has this kind of normal distribution. This one has this highly skewed distribution. One point I was grading these, and every exam I had graded, every quiz I had graded, either got a perfect score or like below a 14. It was this weird kind of separation where everyone either totally mastered it or didn't do so hot on it, and there was very little in between. I was a little bit surprised by that. I'm not sure what to make of it. You lost points overall in a variety of places on your quiz. There wasn't like a particular pattern or question that I noticed where like people consistently got it wrong. With the exception of the amphibian phylogeny, a lot of you paired up caecilians with frogs or with salamanders instead of frogs and salamanders together. So that's the one spot where I saw like a consistent pattern about losing points. So I am going to post your grades in Blackboard just at the end of class. I'll make sure those are open. Also in Blackboard, there is a PDF that has example answers that earn full credit. So for those longer answers questions on the front, if you're not sure what you should have done to get full credit, I posted student answers that did get full credit. So you can kind of compare yours to theirs, see how you did, and then of course, let me know if you have any questions about it. Sid, go ahead. Oh, yeah, that's just a miss. Yeah, so sorry. Yeah, that's out of 20. Sorry. Yeah. I just didn't change that. Yep. Thanks, sir. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to give these back. You have a ticket out today. Up there is the QR code. While you're doing that, I'll give these back. Note, one important announcement is my open hours next week are going to be short. I only have from 1 to 2 available. We have this like university-wide thing from noon to 1 that I have to do. So I'll only be in here for an hour next Monday. I put that notification on your class program. Also, please remember you have a class program for next week, Monday. There's a lot of stuff on there. There's nothing specific for Wednesday because the field trip, if we end up having class Wednesday, that's going to be just fine. It's like a bonus. But go ahead and make sure you got all of that work for Monday next week. I'm going to pause this.